How much does a private investigator make? What is your best guess on the average annual earnings for a PI today? Go down in the comments below and let me know. Hey, welcome to the PI Guy channel, tips, tricks, and advice for professional private investigators. My name is John Morris. I am a licensed professional private investigator. Here are a few of the most significant factors determining how much a private investigator can make. The first is the category or type of investigation a PI can work in. There are literally dozens of areas a private investigator can specialize in and focus on, as you see from this list right here. We have everything from accident investigations to locating assets to background checks and surveillance, and the list goes on and on. And each of these investigative areas that a private investigator may work in commands differing fees based on the complexity of the investigative field and other considerations. The fee charged, be it hourly, a preset one-time fee, or retainer-based, also has many things that determine how much you charge the client. As I started researching the subject, I decided to do a quick Google search first, and this is what I discovered. According to these online websites, a private investigator will make between $31,000 and $85,000 a year, and that is quite a spread to be sure. We also see that a PI can earn $27 per hour. Now, is that a good hourly wage? Well, if we look at the low annual salary of $31,000 and only consider working 50 weeks a year so we get some time for a vacation, then the PI only has to work about 23 hours a week at $27 per hour to make that 31 grand every year. And if we look at the high end of that scale, the $85,000, well, you now need to work around 63 hours a week at $27 an hour. Now, the problem with these calculations is they calculate earnings, not income. To calculate income, we need to consider expenses and taxes and all that fun stuff, and we will discuss that in just a moment. But if we consider that hourly wage of $27 an hour and assume 40 hours a week, that comes out to $54,000 a year. Here is a look at the highest paying cities for PIs according to Indeed.com. This may surprise you quite a bit, as most people probably think PIs make a lot more than this. And you know what? A lot of PIs do make considerably more than this. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the mean hourly wage is $29.31 per hour, and the mean annual wage is almost $61,000. Now remember, mean is not the average. What we mean when we use the term mean is that it is the exact middle, or 50% of the PIs out there make more than $29.31 an hour and $61,000 a year, and 50% make less. If you take that mean hourly wage, multiply it by 40 hours a week, then multiply it by 52 weeks in a year, you will come up with nearly $61,000 for an annual wage. Now, really quick, where do all of these PIs work? Well, again, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, here is a map that shows employment levels for each state in the U.S. You should take these numbers with a grain of salt. These numbers, after all, are from the government, and we know how accurate those numbers can be, don't we? When I look at Colorado on this map, which is where I live, it indicates there are 290 to 700 PIs here. Now, that in and of itself is quite a spread, but I know for a fact when we had licensing for PIs in Colorado a few years ago, there were well over 1,000 licensed investigators. In fact, I think that number was closer to 1,200. Now, where can a PI make the most money in the U.S.? Well, here's a quick glance at the annual mean wage of private investigators by state. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there is a bit of a spread for the annual mean salaries from state to state too, with the lower ranges slightly below $42,000 up to $54,000, and the higher ranges from about $67,000 to $85,000. Then there is this map, which shows us another huge factor in determining what a PI can make. That determining factor, folks, is location, location, location. One huge consideration for any business model is how many customers are available to any business. Rooftops are how they refer to it in the retail world, but in many businesses, rooftops and population are major considerations to be sure. It doesn't matter what you charge per hour. If you don't have the clients available to market to, then you can't get the hours to make the annual salary you desire. And as you see from this map, the major markets really fragment where PIs are employed. Now, that does not mean if you're in a smaller market, you can't make a good salary. Quite the contrary, in fact. It just means you must market differently in smaller markets than in larger markets. I am in a smaller market and I am quite successful. I am successful because of several things I do, such as marketing to my immediate market area, marketing to surrounding smaller markets, and yes, even to the larger metropolitan market. So far, we discussed how the type of investigations a PI works will determine how much they can charge, which ultimately determines how much they can make. We have also taken a close look at how location can affect how much a PI can make, and we took a good look at what the average, or rather the mean salary is for a private investigator today. But what is the number one fact determining how much a private investigator can make? Well, in my humble opinion, based on many years of business experience, the one biggest thing that determines how much you can make as a PI, or in any profession for that matter, is desire, commitment, and determination. Yeah, I know that is three things, but in reality, it is one thing. Let me explain it quickly. The easiest way is to tell you about my experience. When I first became a PI, I knew nothing about what a private investigator was. I mean, I was as green as they come, folks. Even after having many decades of running businesses under my belt, I had never encountered the private investigation profession. So I was like most people, and what I knew and thought about when it came to PIs was what the media had told me. And from that perspective, it sounded very intriguing, but I was a realist too. I knew there had to be much more to it than what TV shows and movies depicted PIs to be. So when the opportunity came up for me to get into the profession, I did much studying to see if it was all it was cracked up to be. And my studies, even with my limited knowledge, did make me decide to jump in head first, but I knew better than to try the old sink or swim routine. I created what I called a 3 to 5 year business plan. Now hear me out here. My business plan had more questions than answers in it, but I knew as I grew, I could answer those questions over time. I also knew then and still believe now there are two key time frames for a new business. The first is the 3-year mark. Most businesses that fail do so within the first 3 years. I was raising a family and I was very accustomed to a set salary, so I knew I needed to have the ability to succeed for 3 years, and to do that I needed to ensure I had the financial wherewithal to make it as well. The next big milestone for new businesses is the 5-year mark. If you make it 5 years, you're probably at that point where you're able to pull a good salary from the business. But even more importantly, if you make it to 5 years, you can probably make it to 10 years. So I had a good long talk with my wife and some friends. Then I took a long, hard look at myself, and I asked myself 2 questions. Can you do this, and do you want to do this? From that, I determined I had the desire to start up this new business venture. But I got rid of the notion that I was going to be a PI. Rather, I was going to become a professional investigator. Yes, even back then, I referred to myself not as a private investigator, but as a professional investigator. I knew the only way I could succeed was to make it a profession, not just another business and not a job to be sure. I was good at getting good paying secure jobs, but I wanted more for myself and my family. Then I had that long conversation with myself about the commitment. Having worked with many new and startup companies over the years, I knew the 3-year and 5-year marks were serious milestones to make in long periods of time as well. If I invest 5 years in my own business, that means those are 5 years I am not working for someone else, not building a 401k, nor building a resume of continued professional experience based on my past knowledge. And then I had to decide if I was determined enough. Do I have the determination to see this through, and not only to see it through, but to see it beyond? To see it through means there is an end, but in my mind, there is no end. It is like being successful. You do not get to a point in success where you are successful and then there is nothing more. Success is a continuing journey to be successful. That goes on day after day, week after week, and year after year. I know PIs out there that make millions every year, and I know PIs out there that make 10 or 20,000 a year. And in both scenarios, they are happy and successful and living the dream that they had about becoming a professional private investigator. Now you are probably wondering about what I mentioned earlier, about considering expenses, taxes, and all that other fun stuff when you calculate your earnings as a PI. There is much more to figuring out your earnings than just multiplying your hourly rate by 40 hours a week and 52 weeks in a year. And I made this video right here that helps explain how to create a budget for a PI business that goes into further detail. So check it out now.